Welcome to the Talented Learning Executive Briefing Series. I'm John Lay, CEO of Talented Learning, and I'm here with John Peebles of Administrate. And John's the founder and CEO of Administrate, which is a training management system. John and I met at ATD all the way back in 2015, and I've been watching this solution grow since then, and I can't wait to share it with you. John, welcome, and can't wait to hear.
Thanks so much for having me. I think we were joking way back then that we were building something a little different, and you kind of were like, how? And so I'm excited to kind of give you a tour of what we've been up to the last few years. A lot of it is just an evolution of a thesis that we built going back to 2015, where we saw a big need, particularly in large complex enterprises, to really help training teams be able to manage training delivery at scale. And we've been thinking about this problem for a long time. We think that there are a lot of great tools out there that people are always using every day that don't get leveraged as much as they could be. And we've got our solution as to how that could look for folks that are running these very large training operations at scale.
Yeah, without a doubt. So I've seen hundreds and hundreds of demonstrations from different learning solution providers, learning management providers, but what you've showed me the last few times, I've never seen before. And it's really exciting to see where your innovation is leading. And this continuous process that you're talking about is going to a good place. And we can't wait to see it.
Well, cool. Well, I thought it might be helpful just to start off with a little bit of a slideshow presentation, just to kind of underscore some key concepts. Don't worry, I promise we'll get into the system quickly. But really, when you think about Administrate, our tagline these days is we want to be enterprise learning infrastructure. And what does that mean? It sounds complicated. It sounds like there's maybe a lot of tech involved. It doesn't have to be, but fundamentally, there's this need where you've got customers of ours, like we'll mention ForgeRock along the way, probably a number of times. That's a company that started off with just a Series A round of funding about almost 10 years ago. They grew and grew and grew, went public a couple years ago on the New York Stock Exchange. It's been a real phenomenal success story. And as they grew, their needs grew and they became more and more complex. And so it's these types of use cases where you've got a large company that's trying to train a lot of different stakeholders. They could be customers, they could be internal employees, they could be partners. And how do you do that at scale? How do you do that globally? How do you do that when one of the fundamentals that we probably don't think about enough in this industry that is still true is 80% of corporate training in the United States is still delivered via classroom. And that could be a classroom that's virtual, like how we're talking today via Zoom. A lot of that certainly happened during the pandemic. But this statistic of 80% is really remained constant over the last few years. And if you think about it, most of the high value training that is delivered within a corporate setting is done within a classroom. So we all have things that we need to do every year, refresher trainings, compliance stuff, security things, all of that. That stuff is important. It needs to be done, but that tends to be delivered, via an LMS or through an e-learning context. When you actually sit down and think about how do we get people to do their jobs better or learn how to do their jobs, maybe it's in a manufacturing setting where everyone who gets hired has to be trained regardless of what their background is, or maybe it's knowledge worker. How do you get a sales force performing better, or how do you get them on board into this new product that we're shipping? Those very high value trainings tend to be done within a classroom. And that means that a lot of the traditional LMS is kind of shut out or off limits to this problem, right? Because those tools tend to focus down very acutely on e-learning content delivery. And when you think about what is the problem with classroom training, it's fundamentally a resource management problem. How do you get the people, the places, the things, and all that stuff assembled and put together so that when everybody arrives on time, everything's there and ready to go? And it's a very, very difficult problem to solve. And even if you kind of get there and you kind of get the bare minimums of success and you deliver a class, well, how do you do it at the same time every time? And how do you do it at the same time every time in your facility that's 2 hours away? How do you do it at the same time every time in your facility that's across the world in Egypt, for example? And these are the problems that many, many companies have to deal with. and they don't have a great tool set or infrastructure to do that. And
So
so,
with it,
go for it.
I said, yeah, with an LMS, you might be able to do onesies or twosies or, one a week, but what happens when you got to do 1,000 of them?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you think of, many companies, Fortune 1000, they'll have tens of thousands of employees. They'll have hundreds and hundreds of instructors. They have these resources all over the world that they need. A lot of times, training is not just pick up your notebook and pen and go to class. It is, where is the specialized equipment that we're training on, and is it ready, and has it been cleaned, and all that type, and calibrated and so forth. All those things need to be thought through, and it's very, very difficult to get this done. And my heart goes out to a lot of these teams that are struggling with this. So we thought we'd work for many years on trying to get them a solution. And if you think about like boiling down kind of what is Administrate trying to do, we're trying to solve two challenges, right? And the first, and these are umbrellas for a whole bunch of problems that go underneath them. But the first one is kind of operational inefficiency. So all the stuff that we were just talking about, the who, what, when, where, and why, that is very difficult to get done at scale. A lot of messing around, a lot of stopping and starting and so forth. Getting that running and getting that templated and getting that repeatable and scalable is really, really important. And that's kind of half the battle. Once you get that operational efficiency going, though, then we want to start analyzing and integrating things and all that. And the reason for that is we want to be able to provide decision support to training teams so that they can improve their operation in ways that may not be super apparent. Certainly, if you're using spreadsheets and stuff's littered all over the place, it's going to be very difficult to see these patterns. And we'll kind of give you some examples of both of these today that we're excited about. So hopefully that makes sense. And this is kind of maybe a graphical representation of maybe what it's like before Administrate, and then what we're hoping to deliver for our customers after we come into the party. And on the left hand, my favorite is these are little sneakers that you might be able to see on the screen, because a lot of this stuff will be done by SneakerNet, right? By people either walking stuff around or emailing spreadsheets or using shared drives. And these problems of scheduling and communicating, and many of our customers have multiple learning management systems. Some of them will have even multiple LXPs. It's a big, complicated tech stack that normally already exists when we come in, and we want to help make sense of it. And so our strategy really is for, as infrastructure, to be the spot where all this stuff plugs into, and you can have a rich data model that's backing this, so you can store all this information that is right now locked up in people's heads and on whiteboards and spreadsheets in one spot, and then you can access it, and we can kind of start solving more interesting problems. And the journey that we're hoping to see customers go on, and this could take a couple of years, many years in some cases, is nail that operational challenge first, get improvement there, then start integrating your tech stack. So those 5 or 6 LMSs, I think the worst scenario we ever saw was a customer that had 13, and they slimmed down to about 5 over the first couple of years of being a customer of ours. We want to get all that stuff integrated, and we want it to be driven out of a common framework. And what we're really hoping is that these tools that you paid good money for and you are very, very valuable become even more valuable when they're integrated, because now you can spend less effort using them. They can be much more standardized and so forth. And ultimately, when you have your operations under control and everything's integrated and you've saved tons of time, then you can reinvest that time in starting to analyze the environment and leverage some of this decision support that I was talking about. And when you think about, what does this actually mean? What's the end result? This is Kevin Streeter. He's the VP over at Ford Rock University. Came in to build their training operation for the customer training programs, eventually took over the internal employee training as well. And he started, it was just him. He hired a couple of people his first year, got running with Administrate. They've been a customer for almost 10 years now. and he's delivering more training than he did at the height of one of the .com darlings, Sun Microsystems, and doing it in much better quality. And one of the really interesting things I think about this story is because they got everything sorted out early on and they had this infrastructure that could grow with their needs, you saw things happen over the years, like they would change their email provider, or they would change their marketing automation platform, or their CRM, or they would change their lab provider. And they could do that because they had the infrastructure to plug and unplug and so forth. And so as their needs grew, they could really kind of make the best decision for their company at the time and at the scale that they were at. And then they could start spending all this time that they saved by automating all this stuff and getting it all operationalized and standardized. They could take that time and reinvest it into innovation. And so over the last few years, Kevin and his team have won numerous innovation awards, including this incredible website now that they've got where you can, as a learner, go start anonymously learning, and then you can eventually register for an account, and it will link up all of your profile that you built anonymously over the last couple of weeks and months. And it's just really, really phenomenal. And that's the type of stuff that we want to see. And that's the end result that we want to achieve with customers.
Awesome.
So when I'm talking maybe in vague terms, if you're watching, you're like, well, what is this thing? This is kind of a layout of how we think about our infrastructure and our platform. And so you can see up here kind of the standard things that you would expect. You know, most companies will have a CRM, most companies will have an HRIS, LMSs and LXPs and so forth. And all that stuff is really valuable, and we want to augment and enhance that stuff. And the way that we'll do that is via API and integrations. So I'll show you, if we've got enough time towards the end, a little bit about our API. I'm an engineer. Well, if you don't ask our engineers, but I'm telling you, I'm an engineer. I'm not allowed to code anymore, but I still enjoy it and really get interested in it. But one of the things that is really important to me is to build a developer experience at Administrate that I would want to experience as an engineer. And so we worked really hard to make sure that engineers and developers of our partners and customers are really treated well and have first-class access to the platform. They can build things on top of it, things like websites, things like apps that are out in the App Store and so forth. We've been really, really amazed at some of the cool things our customers have done with our API. But we also have a lot of integrations. Some of them are out of the box, like Zoom and Teams, but some of them are a bit more configurable, like hooking up to Salesforce and so forth. And one of our customers is the largest Salesforce customer in the world. They have the largest Salesforce instance in the world. They're very proud of this. And so they leverage these integrations and get a lot of value out of them. And then what is our domain, right? Well, so Administrate focuses down on classroom management, business intelligence, and this decision support stuff. And so, you know, if you're selling your training, we've got some commercial support there, things around pricing your courses and getting them out on the website and selling stuff. Operational support is a big one. That's all this classroom management and resource management. And then because we're sitting on top of this rich data model, the reporting and analytics and business intelligence piece is very, very important to our customers. And ultimately, this decision support manifests in a bunch of different ways. The one that I'll show you today is around an AI scheduler that helps with kind of resource planning and optimization over long periods of time. So those are kind of the four things that we do very well, that we concentrate on, and everybody else, you know, does what they do well. And then we can provide this infrastructure for folks that want to go out and solve this problem of how you deliver massive amounts of training and automate it as much as possible at scale.
You don't make LMSs, but you just make the whole infrastructure better.
Yeah, that's the goal. And, you know, sometimes folks, customers, they're worried about this, right? They're like, well, we just invested all this time and activity and getting an LMS up and running, and it may not be perfect, but it works pretty well. That's fine. Don't throw that investment out the window, right? LMSs are very good at what they do. We don't play in that space. We want to be that back office partner for you and your team to really make your lives better and let other applications and companies focus on the learner experience, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So it might be that terrifying time to do a live demo. So I can
could go wrong on a live demo. Absolutely
nothing has ever gone wrong at a live demo at Administrate. So let me just reshare my screen here, and let's see here. What you're seeing right now is I'm logged in to a demo instance of Administrate. This is a big system, a big platform. You can see across the top, there's a whole bunch of things that I'm not going to show you today. And if you've got questions about that, obviously get in touch. What we're going to focus on today is just some of the key differentiators that have really driven huge amounts of value to our customers over the years. What we found was, and you might be sitting there thinking, I've never heard of Administrate, where did this company come from? Well, over the last 3 years, we have made a significant pivot where prior to that, we were focused more on small to medium-sized businesses. But a few years ago, we realized through stories like ForgeRock and Royal Caribbean, and a couple other large enterprises, that we could deliver huge amounts of value to these large, complex training organizations. And so that's where all of our focus is today. And we've got a lot of experience in helping companies that have these very diverse, very chaotic, in some cases, training operations get lined up and get organized, and then kind of move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you will, and get to that point where they can start to innovate and really invest in areas where they know they need to. What I'm going to show you first here is a concept called a course template. And this is really fundamental to how Administrate not only works, but also how it's different from a traditional LMS. And I think I'm going to find we've got some really interesting courses here. Emergency landing procedures, that sounds good. Or tax shelters. Hopefully nobody from the IRS is looking at this, but we're going to go in and just, what is a course template? Now, the key concept here is we are trying to get all the information out of brains, off of whiteboards, out of drawers filled with paper, Excel spreadsheets of what is required to run a classroom or an e-learning or a blended event. All right. Now, this first tab will look a lot like what every LMS in the world has, right? Which is you go through and you put the title of your course and you've got some codes, and Administrate's like a lot of systems. We have advanced custom field features. So some of this stuff is stock fields. A lot of this stuff has been added to the data model, and you can do that. And the customers get really clever about how they want to store things. But basically, this is the type of demographic data that you tend to find on a traditional LMS. Where it gets different is after I filled out kind of my informational stuff about the course template, then I start moving into, okay, what's required? And what I'm doing here is I've got 4 instructors that are approved to basically teach this event, this class. Now, that doesn't mean that these instructors are teaching this class or will teach this class. It means that they can teach these classes. And so when it comes to decision time, we're still building a template, but we have not actually scheduled anything. And the difference between LMS that's only focused on e-learning and Administrate is when you think about an e-learning course, you take a course, you give it a title and so forth, like we just saw, then you upload your content to it, and then you publish it, and students register onto it, and they work through it. Maybe tens of thousands of students will go through that. Maybe you update the content once a year, every quarter, every month, whatever it is. But it's sitting there and it's kind of a living thing. People come in and they take the course and then they're done. That's not how it works in a classroom setting. In a classroom setting, you have to schedule at a specific date and time, and everything that you need for that class has to be brought to bear during that date and time, and it has to be done in the right order and so forth. And you have to repeat this over and over, because once the class ends, then you go to schedule the next class, or the next event for that class, and you got to do it all over again. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to put guardrails down as to who, what, when, and where these classes can run, so that when it comes time to schedule, the computer is helping you make these decisions and actually suggesting the resources and so forth that you might need, and it makes sure that you don't miss anything. One of the other ways that we do this, and this is probably the first real example of seeing a template in action is on these workflow groups up here. So there we've got a few workflow groups, and I can add these to this course template, but it might just be easier to show you kind of what I mean when I say a workflow group by coming over into our massive control panel and let's see, task workflows. Now, I could come in here and add a workflow, and this could be something like clean the classroom. Do it, right? Now, this is where hopefully it'll start to concrete what we're doing, and that is I am working in an offset situation, and that is I want to, before the event start, 2 days before the event start, make sure that the classroom is cleaned. And I want, now these are various things that I can define. So it's call or an email, but obviously that's not what we're gonna do here, but I can assign this to myself, right? And what this means is that whenever I go, if I associate this task workflow with the classroom template that I'm working on, whenever I go to schedule that class, it will make sure that a task pops up in my tasks over here as a user, and it will do the calculations of when that classroom needs to be cleaned automatically because it knows 2 days before the event starts. Hopefully that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So back here to the course template, and I'll kind of blitz through some of this. Obviously, you can put content against it. This could be anything from SCORM to videos. Some of this could be published out where learners can get access to it. We've got a large document management system that has very advanced versioning. You can access it via an API and so forth. And that's a great way for some of our customers to make sense of all this content that they have laying around. That ForgeRock example that I mentioned earlier, they've done a lot of work building out this very advanced taxonomy of classifying all the various content assets that they have. And that lets them do things like suggestions and we think you like this and so forth. Very, very powerful stuff. We're not going to go into any of that today. What we're going to get to, though, is the scheduling piece of the template. And again, this is all done using offsets, right? And so you can see here, I'm basically scheduling a classroom. This looks a little complicated, but once you learn it, it's pretty straightforward. But basically what we're doing is we're laying out the pattern that we want to see for this class, right? In this case, I want 3 sessions. I want them to be day 1, day 2, day 3, right? Which means that they'd be in sequence, and I can have them titled differently or whatnot. And, you know, I could basically say, I want every 2 days, I want 5 sessions, right? And I can generate this and it will blow away what I had. And then now we come out with basically a new pattern. And as I get this pattern to where I like it, it's very important because, you know, and I can say, well, it's going to read Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You know, there's all kinds of things that you can do. You can go nuts on this. A lot of our customers will be working out in markets like the Middle East. They're not working necessarily Monday through Friday working pattern, and Administrate can handle that very elegantly. But we're telling the computer what we want in an ideal world to see, and then the computer can do all the date calculations for us when we come to scheduling time. And this works for classroom, self-paced, or blended. Blended events are very popular with our customers because you can do pre-work via eLearning, you can do post-work, that type of stuff. But the meat of this is that classroom schedule. And then we kind of advance to resources. What is required to run this class? Now, resources are completely defined by the customer. What we do is during implementation, we'll work with customers to set up their resource types. And this is something customers can do themselves. They don't have to have us or call us or anything like that. But, you know, we can go nuts here. They can have everything from laptops to projectors to augmented reality headsets. And what I'm going to say is that I'm going to need at least one of these, and it's required for every session. So if I add that requirement, now what happens is the computer knows that I need at least one augmented reality headset for each of the 5 sessions of this course. And that's important because I don't necessarily always need every resource for every session. Some of our customers have swimming pools and, you know, fire engines and things like that they are making sure, you know, you have hands-on training for, but it's only a portion of the course. And so you can get very fine-grained for how that lays out. Pricing, I'm going to skip over. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do around templating pricing, everything from discounting rules to, cost-based accounting, all this type interdepartment accounting is very popular for a lot of our customers because they want to send a bill to the department that they trained if they're an internal training event. And achievements are about what you expect. You can have multiple achievements that are earned. This is basically a credential that happens when passed or some other milestone is hit with the course. Multiple achievements, you have multiple certificates that are linked to those achievements. This stuff can all get linked up to Credly and so forth. And it's a very powerful way of managing complex situations that we sometimes see where customers will have multiple different routes to get to an achievement that are all valid, but they're all equivalent. And so you can model that stuff with Administrate, and that's something that a lot of systems will struggle to do. But basically, we've now got the basic info about our course template, who can instruct this, and what are workflows around getting things ready and so forth. What is the content, if any? What's the scheduling pattern look like? What resources require? How much does it cost? And how am I going to price it? And what do I get when I go through that? And that's the building blocks of what we need to now go out and schedule a class. And I'll just show you that really quickly. You can see here, Administrate's got a lot of different ways to filter things. And so this is designed to get the training team to find what they want as quickly as possible. But I'm just going to go in and create an event. And an event in Administrate lingo is a class that has been scheduled, right? Now, there's a lot of stuff on this screen, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that public speaking course, and I'm going to select that from my course templates. Now, I don't have to use a course template. I could type all this stuff out manually, but that's not very fun. So I'm going to use Public Speaking 101. And you could see when I selected that template, it starts filling in things that it already knows, things like title, how many sessions there's going to be, and so forth. And then it's going to still ask me for a location, which is Atlanta. Once I know my location, and again, these can be set up as part of our implementation process, and you can always do all this setup yourself, and we'll train you on that. But basically, the locations will be linked to taxes and time zones and so forth. So again, the system is meaning that I don't have to remember all that stuff. And then I go down and I say, you know what, I really like it to start on Monday. And with that, 3 pieces of information: which course, where do I want to run it, and when do I want it to start. The computer lays out everything. And if I were to hit create, this would be up and running. It starts as a draft, but that's all I had to do. I only had to put in those 3 pieces of information, and then everything is standardized. And instructors get communication sent out to them automatically. And if I put students on here, there's a whole bunch of email communication and workflow around that. We're not going to go into that today, but that's just gives you an idea of how when we go live with a customer, what we tend to hear and what we expect is that 80 to 85% of the manual effort required to run a class gets removed overnight. Because as you can see, I don't have to type any of that stuff. I don't have to think about it. It's all standardized. And that frees me up to go to lunch early or to do more interesting things. So I'll pause right there. But any comments, John, or I can kind of keep rolling.
Keep going. It's interesting to see just from all the viewers here that have learning management systems know that you can't do. I mean, you have to do this every single time, and you don't get any recommendations, and you don't get any help doing it. You're just manually plugging this in. I want this on Tuesday and Wednesday, and you got to try to create that. And no LMS is thinking about all the interacting pieces here to knock out that administration, and that's the value. That's the value, because there's so much value in terms of money saved and time saved and risk averted, really, by just having all this hooked together and automated.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a whole lot of complexity here that we're glossing over, that if you know, right? And I'll just give you an example. Me choosing that Monday to start, maybe there's a public holiday on the Wednesday, or maybe the business is closed on the Friday, right? Having to juggle all of those interactions between dates and people and so forth is really, really difficult. And Administrate will do that for you. You plug in your holidays, your instructors, they plug in when they're available and so forth. One of the features that we just released that we're really excited about, and you'll see that in action in just a few minutes, is instructors can link their calendars now with Administrate. And so if you've got a dentist appointment next Tuesday, Administrate will know about that. And it will mean that when it's time, if an administrator goes to schedule a class, and they'll see that you're unavailable, right? And it's just simple things like that. When you multiply that out by hundreds and hundreds of instructors globally in all these different time zones, and subsidiaries have different working patterns. This happens to us at Administrate all the time. I'm located here in Scotland, and I've been, I'm an American, but I've been here for 10 years. I forget that Memorial Day is happening and things like that, and it's normal, but that's where the system will have your back and make sure that these things get taken into account. And this pattern of kind of going in and scheduling classes is one that customers have used for years, and they've been really, really happy about that. Like I said, it saves them a lot of time, but we started wanting to see how we could improve on this. And so we really wanted to watch how customers were working. And what we found was that customers would oftentimes sit down and try to plan out a group of classes over the next 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months. And they would want to kind of get their calendar more or less locked in on some increment of time. Sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes longer. And they would use Administrate to do this, but there was still a bunch of pre-work that happened to happen in order to figure out, all right, exactly how many courses are we going to be running? Where are they going to be? Do we have enough instructors? Things like that. And so we wanted to take a step back and think, how can we use these building blocks of knowing what's required to run a class and knowing about things like when the company's open for business and people's availability. And so about 3 or 4 years ago, we sketched out a strategy to try to solve this problem for customers, particularly ones that are working at scale. And we've seen this problem repeated and articulated to us over and over and over by training teams. And that is, how do I lay out next year's schedule or next quarter's schedule? And so we're really, really excited to basically be days and a couple of weeks away from launching the first public preview of what we're calling the scheduler. We thought long and hard about what do we call this thing, and we thought, what, we're going to come up with the scheduler. And so not a brand name or anything like that that's going to wow you, but what this is basically a way to have the computer help you plan and optimize a complex schedule that involves hundreds of different resources and hundreds of different instructors, and I'll show you how it works. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to just imagine that I'm trying to plan out the next 3 months of my training schedule. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say I'm going to create a new schedule, Talented Learning University, maybe. We're going to do Atlanta. That's where my sister lives. So, and we fly a lot of Delta Airlines, so we're loyal to Atlanta. We're going to go through, let's just say, the end of June. And it defaults to the days of the week that I work or that our company works and so forth, and the times. And when I hit this, I create a schedule. It basically gives me a workspace here, so a blank workspace. And I can start saying, you know what, I know that I want to run about 15 different public speaking courses over the next few months, right? And I also know that I want to run some of the public speaking 201 courses, another 15 of those. And as I'm doing this, the system is basically laying out, here are the slots that we need to get scheduled. I can collapse them, and this could be dozens and dozens of different courses. Now, there are tools within Administrate that I'm pretty excited about, where the system actually bubbles up suggestions as to how many of these courses to run and which ones you need to run. We found that that's a very difficult problem for a lot of customers to solve at scale, which is they have maybe tens of thousands of learners going through defined learning paths. And it's actually, you don't know what you need to schedule in order to satisfy the demand that you created by making everyone go and follow this path of learning. Administrate will actually be able to bubble that up for you. And we've got a really nice couple of tools, and you can always run your own custom reports as well. But basically, I'm going to say I want to run these 30 events. Now, as I've added these, it's basically saying, hey, you need instructors in order to teach this stuff, right? And so I'm going to come in and I'm going to start adding instructors. So I want instructors that are approved for Public Speaking 101 and 201, and I'm going to filter down. I'm going to grab all of these instructors. And the key thing here is I'm not saying that these instructors will teach this course or these classes. I'm saying to the computer that they are eligible to be considered for the solution for this plan. So basically, it's not that Jay may never actually be considered for this plan, and there could be a bunch of reasons for that. But you can see as I've actually loaded up these instructors, I'm starting to get availability information that's pulling through from their calendars. So you can see Jessica's just not available these days, or that week there. The computer knows this, and it's going to take into account the solution. You can also see here that Hal is already booked on another class that he's teaching, and so again, not available to be considered for this solution on that specific day, at least for that time slot. And same thing for resources, right? Let's see. I need some augmented reality headsets, so I'm going to add in those. And I need some projectors. Well, I got 2 projectors. We got way more headsets than we have projectors. So it goes, and whiteboards. And again, these are resources that you define. So you may not want to care about whiteboards, but you may care very much about some medical simulator or device or whatever that you need to certify your customers or your students on. And once I've done this, I've now got enough resources where I can start a solve. When I click solve, what's going to happen is the computer will start running about 3,000 to 5,000 solutions a second. And it's basically an AI algorithm that is doing 2 things. It wants to get a legal solve, so something that will actually work. And then once it gets a solution, it's going to try to get the most optimized solution. Now, optimized means different things to different customers and different environments. Some of our customers have very expensive pieces of hardware, and they want to make sure that every minute of that hardware is scheduled to the max, right? Because any minute that it's not being used, they're losing money. Other customers have the complete opposite view, which is they've got expensive instructors maybe, and they want to minimize the money and time that they spend on those things. It really depends on what you think in terms of your business or your operation, and we work with you to basically load up those types of optimization hints to the algorithm. But if I hit solve, what happens is this thing starts blinking away. And like I said, thousands and thousands of scenarios are being run. And then once the solution is acquired, then it will start to optimize, right? Now, sometimes this can take a minute or 2. Sometimes this can take 20 or 30 minutes. It really depends. What I thought I would do is I'd click over to an already solved schedule just to see what's going on and point out a few things. So this is a schedule. This is a plan that we came up with a few weeks ago. And you can see that what has happened is the computer has said, look, here's where we're going to run these different classes, effective presentations. We're going to run on a Wednesday and Thursday. This kind of split pill means that this is the first session, the second session. So, you know, things can run over sequential days and so forth. And one of the things that's important for us is we never want Administrate to be forcing its worldview upon you, the administrator, right? Because we all know how frustrating that is to have the AI overlord kind of making a dumb decision and you're trapped by this thing. So when we get a solution, we actually want to make it so that you can easily make changes, right? And so one of the ways you can do that is you can say, you know, I don't really want to use that I'll run that on the Wednesday. I want to move it over here to the Tuesday. And you can see that, one, it won't let me plop this down onto a day that's not going to work for this class. So like, for instance, I tried to move the first session beyond the second session, and it's not letting me do that. That's not a legal move, right? But the other thing that's happening is you can see down midway down the screen to Jessica Chambers, and the instructor. She is the instructor that is teaching this class. And if I move the class to a Tuesday, I need to move her to the Tuesday, right? And so her schedule needs to be updated. And this is the kind of complex interlinking of things that is very, very difficult to solve when you're sitting there with a spreadsheet in a dark room, wishing that you had a better way to do this. And that's the stuff that the computer will do for you. The other thing that I'll point out is you can see here, we've actually got a conflict now with this schedule. And that kind of links us back up to this warning message that's at the top of this plan. And that is, when we did this solve originally on the 14th of March, the plan was going to work. But since then, something has changed, right? Now, that could have been a change to the course template. Maybe somebody went in and said, actually, we need 3 instructors now instead of just 1, or we need a different resource. Or maybe the instructor went in and updated their calendar, or the resource got booked out. And, a lot of things can happen since we made this plan. What you can come back and you can reload up this plan, and it will still show you the plan, but it will point out where there are now conflicts. And that's a really important thing for training teams as they're going through this planning process, because as we all know, what tends to happen is you build out a schedule and then you send it around, and then you get an email back from Hal, and Hal Jordan, one of our instructors, is like, look, I'm really sorry, but I forgot to update my calendar. We're going to be on a holiday, in April of this year. And it's like, great, now I have to go and reshuffle this whole thing manually if you're doing it manually, or you can just come back and load it up and see where the problems are and adjust them or resolve, right? And so that's something that's really important. The other thing you can see is we've got an issue browser, and it'll basically identify how many issues you have, bring your attention to them, figure out where that conflict is, and then help you resolve it. So that's at a high level, but we're really excited about this, and we're really excited to be working through this problem, which affects all of our customers and pretty much anybody that's doing any classroom training anywhere. And we're really excited about the value that's going to bring. And it's just an example of all of the data that we hold within Administrate is brought to bear in order to feed this thing. We could take this scheduler and we could mail it to an LMS and give them the code and whatever, and it'd be very difficult for a traditional LMS to actually even hook this thing up, because traditional LMSs don't have these concepts of resources and instructors and availability and all that built in, because they've focused, rightly so, on their core problem, which is e-learning delivery, which doesn't have these challenges. So that's a scheduler. Like I said, we're really excited about it, and hopefully we can get this into the hands of more customers very soon.
Impressive.
I thought that maybe just for the last few minutes here, I could take us through a couple of other key differentiators that I maybe mentioned or I mentioned a little bit early on, which is a developer experience in reporting and analytics. So very quickly, one of the things that customers very quickly come to us is they get all this data into Administrate, they start saving tons of time, and then they want to run reports. And the good news is we've got a very powerful reporting engine built into Administrate as a first-class feature, and you do not have to contact our help desk. You don't have to do anything to build a report. Instead, you just come into our reporting engine, we create a new report, and away we go. Within this, basically the concept is you tell the system what data you want to find or filter on. You can add conditions, and this is the kind of a glimpse into our data model browser, right? So if you're listening in, you're a little bit technical. Basically, the data model is a relational database, and each entity has relationships to other entities. You can do all of these types of joins and so forth. And we train people on this, so don't worry about it. But you can just scroll down and see all the different fields that are accessible via the reporting engine. Every field that's saved within the system is accessible automatically to this reporting engine, including custom fields that you define. And so you can come in here and you can say, look, I want all of the companies. So on the accounts entity that, let's have a town that includes Edinburgh, right, which is where I'm located at. So that would basically pull all the accounts out of Administrate that have a address with the town in Edinburgh. Then I can come over here and say, what do I want to see on my report? What do I want to see when I get these companies? And again, I can go into add output columns, and I can say, I'd really like to see the name, and I'd really like to see their ID and so forth. I can figure out the ordering of these fields that I want. I can group it by sections. I can do sorting, or I can just view the report. Right. And this caret here will let me drill down to the underlying data entities that make up this row within this report. You can do a lot of stuff with this. You can export it. You can do CSV. You can download. You can set up a communication schedule where Administrator will automatically email out to an audience of your choosing a report on a schedule. You can hit this report with an API call and then take this data and push it into your dashboarding application. There's a bunch of stuff here, but suffice to say, it's very powerful. You have full access to it. And I would say the average number of reports that our customers tend to build is around 100 to 150, and it's that powerful. So we're really, it's just one of those things that it's core to our strategy of being able to bring in this information and data from other systems via integrations, access it through this reporting engine, and then disseminate it out to your stakeholders or use it to make decisions, right? Lastly, I'll just flick over to our developer portal. Again, this is important because a lot of times customers are like, well, look, this all sounds great, but we either don't have IT, or if we need IT resource, it's at a premium. They need to make sure that they can get access to this stuff easily and so forth. We have built out an API first strategy here at Administrate. And so what you see here is live out on the web. It's our full API, completely documented. And we actually have a IDE hooked up here live. So if I hit try me, pops this code over here, and I can run this code, get these results. And I can also come in here and say, you know what, I want to add something to this query. This is a GraphQL API. Even if you don't understand anything about programming, you can see that I'm writing a query that hits the contacts entity. I'm asking for just the first entity, and I'm asking for the fields ID, first name, last name, and locale, and then I get that result back. The key thing here is, because this is an API first strategy, as a customer or your partner or whoever you designate gets access to the exact same API that our engineers get access to when they're building Administrate. And so that means that if you want a feature or you need something solved or whatever, and it's not on our roadmap, you have a way to solve your problem, and you can very quickly and easily get data in and out of the system. And we're really proud of this. And like I said earlier, we've seen customers and their vendors and partners build some incredible things, including websites and apps on the App Store and on phones, and hooking up various infrastructure within their organizations. And even things like controlling access to doors, right, based on credentials of the students and so forth. That type of stuff is possible, and it's much easier and much more powerful than kind of a traditional learning product. So kind of just stop there. Hopefully that was informative and kind of illustrates the things that we're really focused on solving. Our whole company is occupied in thinking about how do we make the training team's life easier. And I think it's just a slight difference from the rest of the industry, which has traditionally focused for the last 20 years on how do we make the learner's life better. We like learners and we love to learn, but we really love to solve that problem of training operations and delivering. Corporate training doesn't have to suck, and the delivery of it doesn't have to suck. And so we really want to be a part of that solution. And we're just thrilled when we see customers, coming off the line after an implementation, and all of a sudden they're like, a huge portion of my team has just been freed up, and now they can go build better training and they can do better things and not have to worry about spreadsheets and monkeying around all over the place, because that's just not a nice way to live.
Wow. Excellent, John. Administrate really solves a unique problem in the industry, because if 80% of training is still live training, either the virtual or live or blended, then there's the administrative aspects that weigh into it. And what I see as key differentiators is the concept of building the templates so that you know exactly how a course is going to be running each time, and then schedule that template later on, versus trying to build that out each time and copy all those. It's just so mundane to go in there with each field and go do that, and know that when you sit down on Monday, you're going to have to do that 10 times on 65 different fields to try to schedule that. So that be able to automate it with a template is great. We touched on like the email notifications. So traditional learning management systems, can push out a notification automatic, but it's always the same notification for all the different types. And to be able to create the templates then on the notifications, that might be multiple notifications or a series of those that are escalating, or different ways, and have that different from course to course. That's something that you can't build in traditionally. And if you think about like customer learning, also to be able to have those notifications be driven through your marketing or your CRM system, so that they can be polished and personalized, and follow on a pattern that's helping drive the desired behavior that you want, is something else that you just can't do in a traditional learning management system. For years, we always said in LMSs, oh, we can integrate with your Outlook calendar, but I never ever saw it done. But that is so important, because people are constantly, it's not even just the schedules of the individual instructors, but it's also the schedules of the rooms and where they're occupied, and all these different things that you're managing in other systems, that typically the connection, the API, is the human that has to sort all that. So be able to tie in just that calendar piece is so huge, because that's going to save like just tons and tons of time. And the other thing is the management of the resources. So the minute that you get into more complicated things, especially maybe you're a dealer that's making equipment, or construction equipment or things like that, and you got to train people on how to tear apart that engine and fix a problem and do that, all those things, to have that ready and prepare that, as well as the concept of all the things that go into a training, or all the things that go into a webinar that you have to do before, during, and afterwards, to automate that and have that show up on your tasks is super interesting. But my favorite piece is, as a non-technical guy, it's still my favorite piece is the API infrastructure, to be able to build what you want and just hook all these pieces together. And so having you guys do it, or having anybody that has the technical skills that knows GraphQL, it's a possible to just stitch these things together and tie all these different customer or out of the box or commercial systems together. Why? All to automate and to save time and money. And one story that you told last time that you didn't tell this time is just about having 500 instructors running around and trying to schedule 500 instructors in all these different locations and all these different courses to support a new product rollout, for example. Those things are just prohibitive in organizations. So is a small business need an administrate? Probably not. But if you're a global training company that's running different training centers and have dozens of trainers or hundreds of trainers around, you can't live without a system like this. Otherwise, you're just doing it with people labor, which is a hard way to do it. So in a big nutshell, that's what I took away as some key differentiators. And I think that we could probably spend about 3 hours, 8 hours getting and digging into all the pieces that we didn't look at today. But you fill a really unique space, a really unique need in the industry, that because it's not glamorous and because it's not shiny on the front end for learners, people tend to forget about how much money they're pouring down the drain with operational inefficiencies. And so almost alone in the world here, you're solving a problem that everybody has, and since nobody else can solve it, they don't realize how much money they're leaving on the table. And so it's nice to see your organization have such a financial impact, probably more so than just about any other learning technology system, because of those operational efficiencies. So any case, great stuff, John. Congratulations on your company, on the 10 years, on growing through innovation, a unique space that you're all but competitorless, in this space, because you're solving a problem that's hard to solve. And just by looking at all the different pieces together, it's amazing to see it. And the scheduler, that automatic scheduler that's just about being able to be released is so cool. There's just like nothing like that in the whole world. So, John, congratulations. Thanks for coming on to the executive briefing series to show this. Listeners, if you want to see more of this, you got any of the problems that we're talking about, John and Administrate has different tools on their website. It's getadministrate.com, where you can start to tease out, all of these operational efficiencies and what you may be leaving on the table from a fiscal standpoint. And I'm sure John and his team would love to work with your organization to help you highlight where they can make a big impact. So there you have it. Everyone have a great day, and we hope to see you on the next one. John, thanks again.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. We'll see you.